Welcome to the Real Freedom Podcast, where we inspire you to pursue your passion to gain time and financial freedom through opportunities in real estate. I'm your host, Mike Swenson. Let's get some real freedom together. Welcome, everybody. We've got another episode of the Real Freedom Podcast. And today we're going to talk a little bit about more larger scale investing. So we've got multifamily investing, some larger complexes, condominium conversions, and different things like that. So today, I'm so excited to share with you, we've got Nick Earls and Eric DiNicola on. And both of them are founders of Winterspring Capital, private equity firm based out of the Boston area in Massachusetts. Since they started the company, they've owned and developed over $56 million of multifamily assets, with another 40 million currently in the pipeline, and we'll talk about that. In addition to that, Nick is also the author of Millions Through Multifamily Development, as well as Passive Income Through Real Estate for Small Business Owners. So you guys definitely have a lot of knowledge to share, and we're excited to hear about it today. So welcome, Nick and Eric, to the show. And why don't you just give us a little bit more information about you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us on, Mike. Just a background on us. Eric and I have been friends for almost 20 years now. Met each other in high school. Always kind of had like a rebellious streak or didn't want to work for the man, that sort of a mindset. Went our separate ways in college. And I got my real estate license in 2011. And we were still in close contact. I said, Eric, I think this is the way, we can buy a rental property and we'll keep saving up money and keep buying these. This is the way we can break out of the system. A couple of years passed, we were saving up money, kind of going along with that plan. And I saw a good opportunity in the condominium development space in Boston. The Boston market, a very unique market. It's one of the number one up there with San Francisco. Some list place it as number one, some list place San Francisco is number one, but sciences, so biotech, medical research, the hospital system's number one in the world here. So the population growth here has been kind of explosive over the past 10 years. You're getting a lot of research grants and different kind of medical funding that's been awarded over the past 20 years, kind of starting to bear fruit. And a lot of that's coming here. Moderna, one of the vaccine producers, is headquartered in Cambridge, right outside of Boston. We've got MIT and Harvard. So we have a huge influx of high income workers moving into the city. Traditionally, like when Eric and I were growing up, people would live in the suburbs that were higher income workers, but the population's become too high now that driving in, being a commuter is unrealistic. You're looking at, double the commute time you were 15 years ago. So people want to live in the city, and that there's also a huge supply shortage, partially just due to geographic issues that Boston's up against. You got the ocean on one side, and it's already kind of jammed in between a lot of other developed cities, but also there's, more importantly than that, there's a supply shortage due to red tape and bureaucracy and NIMBYism. Neighbors are very empowered. Projects can be killed due to neighborhood groups. So this has just led prices to skyrocket. And some neighborhoods of Boston are the highest price per square foot in the country. So we saw an opportunity to get in there and be a part of that. Now, obviously, the barrier you have to overcome is getting these projects permitted or finding a pre-permitted project where someone already went through all those hoops of getting it approved. But we've kind of carved out a niche of doing that since 2015. Our first project was in 2015. We get projects approved here, and we've been doing it ever since. And that's kind of been our main thing. We're doing a couple other tranches of our business now, but that is there's a lot of money to be made if you can overcome those barriers.
We had the idea early on. He's working up here. I was working in New York City in private equity, and it started in public equity. Trading actually. And we knew that, the paths we had started on weren't for us, but we had known that it was sort of just a means to getting to where we wanted to be. We got to the point where condo development, we realized, especially in our city, was the niche sort of thing that was going to propel us. And it didn't allow us at first to have assets that we held on to, but it allowed us to profit pretty quickly relative to maybe other real estate investments, and sort of at least get our foot in the door into what became, over even the last 5 or 6 years, a more and more difficult industry, at least in Boston, to get your foot in the door.
Now, talk a little bit about the early days, maybe the first, couple projects that you guys did. Because I know a lot of people are always curious, like, how do you get started into that? Now you're doing some larger developments, but what does that look like at the beginning in terms of seeing that opportunity, finding the funding and that kind of stuff for folks that might be interested in maybe going down a similar path, in the future? How did you guys get started with that?
So our first project was basically, it was kind of what you would think would be a classical flip. It was a really dilapidated 2-family, or some other parts of the country you guys call them duplexes. Yeah, but we call them 2-families here. And it was very dilapidated, and it was in a kind of an up and coming neighborhood of Boston, East Boston. And, it could be purchased for a low price, but flipping it, that could have made us a profit. But we saw, the opportunity for even more profit if we added an additional unit. And the reason we saw that opportunity is because we were studying the zoning code. As I mentioned earlier, the zoning code is restrictive, and then most projects need special approval. But every once in a while, if you're looking really closely, you'll see a plot of land come on the market or being shopped off market. At this point, it was on the open market because we were rookies and we hadn't built up all those connections yet. But we saw it on MLS, and we looked at the zoning code and say, hey, this is in a 3-family zone. It's got plenty of lot size to add a third unit. So why, instead of just fixing up these 2 small units, why don't we make 3 big, nice units, luxury condos, because there's a demand for that there. And in terms of getting it funded, I think that's the biggest thing that would kind of trip people up, getting started into this. So there's a couple options. Number one, you're going to have to save up money like we did, I think, if you want to go down this path. As you progress along, you're going to bring on investors, but for your first project, it's hard to raise money. So you're probably going to have it be mostly your own money. And partnering like we did makes that easier. So partnering and saving up some money for a few years. And then local banks often will fund, with good conventional financing, these sort of projects. So you want to look for a local bank that's active in this space of development, because they're more flexible, and they'll look at it on a project basis. And if your credit's good, and we're not talking immaculate, but you don't have any like missed payments or late payments on your credit history and stuff like that, local banks will consider you. But even if you can't find a local bank, you can go to a private lender. There's hard money lenders and other private lenders out there, that this is, all they do, their bread and butter is these sort of flips or development deals. And they'll fund new people. They'll look at it on a project basis, as long as, again, and they'll be more flexible with your credit as well. But, if you have like a bankruptcy or something, maybe they won't fund you. But for most people, you can get some pretty flexible options from private financing. You'll pay a couple points more in interest. But if you're doing a profitable project, you'll probably be able to take that on the chin, and then your next job, you'll be able to go to a bank and you'll make even more profit.
Yeah. So then you were able to take that 2-unit, 2-family. Is that what you said?
2-family. Yeah.
Yep. So you added on an addition to that building to create it to a 3-family. And then after that, we're able to take that project to the bank or to a lender and say, okay, we've done this one. We've got this one under our belt. Now, will you help fund the next one?
Well, we went to a conventional lender from the start to acquire that. So we bought it as its own individual, a normal acquisition loan with 25% down, like anyone might buy a house, with the intent that, hey, look, this is what we're going to do. And so we're also going to need construction financing. So that was a separate loan or separate plan. Eventually it gets wrapped into one loan once you start construction, but it was a separate loan that was 100% financed. So we put 25% down on the property. We bought it. We owned it. We were making monthly payments on that 2-family at the time. And since we didn't need any variances through the zoning board of appeals in Boston, we were building something that fit within the code. It was just something that Nick found and sort of saw an inefficiency that this lot wasn't being used to its highest and best use. Because of that factor, we were able to draw up plans and immediately apply for our permit, which, you don't get that day, especially in Boston, but you certainly get much quicker than if you needed variances and had to get approvals to make a bigger building than is allowed and all that.
Right.
So we immediately start construction on it and say, okay, we gut the entire inside, knock everything out, completely gut it to just kind of an open shell. It cost us, say, $30,000 to do that. We go to the bank and say, okay, we need to draw $30,000 on our construction loan. They come out and they say, okay, great, you guys did the work. They release $30,000 out of our construction loan into our account. So it sort of reimburses us for that. So we're then at that point, just to continue with kind of the structure of how that worked, we're still paying interest on the original acquisition every month. We own, 25% of that original property. And then now we're paying interest on the $30,000 we drew from the construction loan. So that continues to build up. And then at the end, we've drawn the construction loan in full. So those interest payments on the construction loan portion at the end will be much higher than that first month. So we have the acquisition interest and construction interest. Then we sell 3 individual units as condos to 3 separate owners. They, form their own condo association and agree to how to maintain the common grounds and all that. We pay off all the loans from that same bank, and then the rest, goes to us.
It's a smart way to do it, to be able to buy the 2-family and then sell them as individual units. That works out well. So, okay. So then after that first property, what did you guys decide to dip into next?
So in the first year and a half, we were just kind of rolling our own money. We rolled them into 2 separate projects, and we were just doing the same sort of thing. We were finding lots where it was an underutilized parcel. Like we found a lot outside of the city. While we actually tied up 2 projects while we were still in the middle of our first project. Because, we were just trying to grow in kind of an ambitious way. So we tied up this project in a city outside of Boston, Somerville, another, affluent, highly populated, densely populated city rather. And that one was a small single family in an area where there's demand for these big kind of townhouse style, larger condominiums, luxury condominiums, over $1 million a piece. And you could build 3 of them there. And it was just kind of this little shack. So we tied that one up for a low price because, again, it looked like, maybe you go in and flip this. But if you're reading the zoning code, you see there's even more opportunity there. So you could get those at, pretty competitive prices if you're paying attention. And then we tied up another building a couple of months later, also in East Boston. That one was our first project where we got involved with politics because it wasn't a case where we studied the zoning code and it said, hey, you can build, extra here. It was a 2-family and a 3-family zone, but we ended up building 7 units. So that was a whole new animal. And that project really kicked us off because, as you can imagine, if you're taking a parcel, you're buying a 2-family or 2 units, and then you end up building 7. There's a lot of profit you've generated there if you're able to get that special permission. So we can talk about that. That was it was like a 6 to 8 month process for that, where we had neighborhood meetings and meetings with civic groups and meetings with a local politician. And then we eventually went to the zoning board of appeals. And basically the strategy there is it's an urban infill project where, again, we're in a densely populated kind of neighborhood. We're buying, a lot where a building already existed and there's already buildings on each side. So what the neighbors are really concerned with is you just putting up some monstrosity that doesn't fit in with the neighborhood and blocks their shade and all that. We're a really good architect that's basically his focus is trying to figure out how to blend it in to the point that it doesn't really actually look larger than the surrounding properties. And it's, it's just tricks of, optical tricks or whatever, because they are actually much larger. But this particular building, we ended up getting approved for 7 units. But if you're going down the street, it just looks like a classic, like Boston Northeast style triple decker 3-family property. But actually it's on a long, narrow lot. So from the street, it looks normal, but you go back. It's a very long building. Yeah. So we fit all 7 units in there, and those were luxury condos. And again, like, an important thing that we look at just to give additional information is the price per square foot when we go into these projects. So in our first project, we were looking at, selling those units for around $400 a square foot, which was pretty good at the time. Just like a year and a half, 2 years later, by the time we finished this second or third project where we needed special permission, we were already getting $600 a square foot in the same neighborhood. So that can kind of show you the level of growth and demand that's been going on in Boston specifically, especially in these up and coming neighborhoods. People are chasing the affordability, and unfortunately for them, that caused the price to rise and turn, because there's more demand there. But we look heavily at what's the difference between the price per square foot we can sell these things for and the cost per square foot that we can build them for. And if there's a large gap there and the acquisition prices in that market aren't too crazy, it's an easy way to kind of pencil test to see how much profit you can make. So we saw, in East Boston specifically, there's a lot of opportunity there with a big difference between the sellout and the cost of construction.
Now on that property going from a 2-family to 7, was it a complete tear down and then you rebuilt it, or you just modified the existing building and added on?
Yeah, it was a complete tear down. That's pretty much our, modus operandi now is just, ground up new construction. It's actually easier to just knock a building down and start fresh. I mean, when you're gutting a building, if it's older, but was constructed in a solid way, you can gut it pretty quickly. But like, for example, we had almost 2 years ago now, we started a very historic renovation where we couldn't knock it down as a historic building, as 3-family. It took us almost 3 months to do the interior demolition of that because it was so tedious. Whereas, we knocked down this 2-family and the project you're referencing in 1 day. So you knock it down. Yeah. I mean, you have to have crews there spraying water into the air with big hoses to prevent dust from traveling. And there's a lot of sort of safety mechanisms and precautions that have to be in play. Rodent control is a major thing in Boston, which neighbors now have really be sort of tuned into and become much more vocal about when you're talking demolition. But for the most part, we just knock down and build fresh. It's just easier, like I said, and actually quicker. And then B, it's brand new construction. So when you go to sell it, you do kind of have that bump slightly on the price per square foot.
So you kind of move from those buildings. Now you're looking at larger buildings. You've got a condo that you're developing. You're converting an office to an apartment here. And then an affordable housing project. Which one would you like to chat about next? Because I kind of want to talk about what's happening now for you to see where you've grown.
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of the condo project, we're pretty excited about that one. It's in Brighton, which is a neighborhood of Boston, right outside Cambridge, 5 minutes to Harvard and MIT. This is a 32 unit, $25 million development. All luxury condominiums, going to have nice amenity spaces like a gym and kind of co-working lounge, nice roof deck, really nice finishes, the top appliances and tile and all that sort of stuff. Again, like I said earlier, life science industry workers, workers in the university system, workers in the medical system, graduate students, foreign graduate students from wealthy backgrounds. So a nice mix of buyers, a lot of demand for these buildings, not much supply, hard to get them permitted, as we talked about. So we're starting construction on that one very soon, and we just closed on it last week. So that we're pretty excited about. The office conversion we're also pretty excited about. So that one's a kind of a different animal, where we identified a parcel in a satellite city of Boston, a more affordable city about 30, 40 minutes from Boston. It's called Lowell. And lots of increased demand for people to live in these types of cities now, because the cost of living in the Boston core is just completely out of control for normal middle class people, due to all these wealthy people coming in. The cost of living is enormous, so people want to live further away. But as I said, being a commuter is tough as well. So a city like this, it has access to the commuter rail. It's just close enough where commuting's still possible. And it also has its own strong economy, one of the largest hospitals in the state, one of the largest universities in the state. And what we see here is there's these main corridors right in downtown, old historic manufacturing city, where there's a lot of underutilized parcels where the zoning says you can only build offices there with first floor retail. But in reality, good city planning would be to have mixed use with retail and residential above apartments. But the zoning code hasn't been updated in decades. It's kind of a big political process to do that. But if you talk to the city planners, they actually support you changing them. You just need a special permit to do that. So we're in the process of doing that right now. That'll be 31 units. Again, kind of more luxury, but far more affordable than the Boston. It's going to have a nice amenity space with gym, still going to keep that first floor retail. So that's something we're working on right now and we're pretty excited about.
Now, how do you figure out who to talk to? What needs to happen? I know for a lot of people on the outside looking into this, they're like, gosh, it just seems like a nightmare, because you're dealing with the city, you're dealing with associations, you're dealing with variances and all that. And I think, probably that's where the opportunity lies, is because most people don't want to have to deal with that. What are the tips that you guys have, or, maybe some best practices that you've learned along the way of who to talk to, what your order of operation is to get this approved, to decide you want to move forward with these projects?
That's actually a very good question, especially as we now have gotten into these other sort of areas of our business where something's different, like the office conversion in a different city. We almost were in that boat ourselves with that not too long ago. Okay, where do we even start with this? How do we figure it out? But as far as sort of the main business and development and going through zoning and all that, say the first step is, once you find a property that you think has potential, maybe you see precedent for it, maybe you see a 10-unit building down the street and you say, okay, they got variances to do that, why couldn't I? Once you're kind of at that stage, you probably want to hire a zoning attorney, because zoning is essentially law in Boston. It's a certain type of law related to properties, so you have specialists who deal with that, and they know the zoning code, they know what type of relief you need. And it's not necessarily rocket science. Like, we figured it out ourselves at this point. Anyone can really go in and look at the zoning code. But when you're dealing with the city and the neighborhood groups, everyone has a zoning attorney. They kind of present on your behalf and say, these are the variances we need. They'll kind of guide you and maybe give you best strategies. And you might figure out some of your own on the way and say, no, that's not going to work for our business. We need to do it this way. And they'll listen to you if you have the right one. But that's kind of step one. Get a zoning attorney, talk with them about what you want to do, and strategize, because you do need strategy when you're dealing with these neighborhood groups in this sort of political process that happens before you eventually get to the zoning board of appeals and present your case, which you need, you want your zoning attorney to do that part. But when you're strategizing, for example, when I say that, something like, the project we were talking about earlier, 7 units we got in a 3-family zone, replaced a 2-unit. The neighbors didn't like that to start. we would have liked to do 15 units, and that would have been really bad. So for the neighbors, I mean, great for us, but you go in and you kind of start, like a very simple strategy might be, okay, get your zoning attorney first, figure out what you want to do. And you might say, okay, look, our bottom line would be 6 units here. Otherwise, based on the price we have to pay for the existing 2-family on this parcel, it can't work otherwise. So you go in and you say, all right, they're not going to agree with our first proposal. Let's go in with, 11 units and say, hey, we want to do an 11-unit building. This is what it'll look like. And they're going to say, whoa, I don't think so. So you say, okay, what are your guys' suggestions? And you work with your zoning attorney and you bring your architect on board, because that's kind of a step I overlooked. You need an architect to sort of design this building. It would be very rough at first. You don't have to give them a lot of money to do a quick schematic, and it's going to be changed so many times that they don't want to put a ton of effort in at first. They'll do a very rough schematic. And then, so you go before maybe your first group or meet with the neighbors and you say, okay, here, I want to do an 11-unit building. The zoning attorney will say, these are the variances we're going to need for such a building. They'll all say, no, this is too big. So then you and your architect will say, what would you guys want to see? And they'll all say, we want to see a 2-unit building. It's a 2-family zone. That's all you can do. Say, okay, well, let's try to meet in the middle here. So then you say, well, we're going to go back to the drawing board, guys, take your suggestions and let's meet in 2 weeks. And then you come back and you say, okay, so we've redesigned the building, and you might have purposely made it sort of extravagant and ridiculous at first so that when you come back for this step, it looks like you've made a lot of concessions. And you say, okay, look, now we have a 9-unit building. Is this getting closer to what you guys want? And then they're probably still not going to be happy, but they at least think and see you're kind of working with them. Then you are, it's not a facade. You are trying to work with them, but you also have a goal in mind as well. So then it's just kind of back and forth, continue the process, get to your zoning board of appeals. You have your final construction drawings at this point that your architect did. Then you present your case. This is all our evidence. We met with the neighbors 50 times. These people support us. These people don't. This politician supports us. They don't. Can we get these variances? And then they'll kind of vote on it. But that's kind of a very holistic overview of the process and where to start, specifically getting a zoning attorney, getting an architect, and deciding, what your strategy and sort of bottom line is and how you can go from there to hopefully above your bottom line.
And at what point does the purchase of the property happen? Is that you're buying it on speculation, or once you've started to nail in, okay, this is how it's going to look, now we can move forward with this purchase? Where does the actual transition of ownership happen in that process?
There's a couple different strategies we use for that. So the number one, kind of the most traditional strategy would be you have a strong due diligence period before you close on the property, where you do all that research ahead of time. If it looks like it's tough to tie it up any other way, that will be the route we'll go. But we actually prefer to have a permanent contingency. It's just hard to get people to agree to that. Usually where you'll be able to get people to agree to a permanent contingency is if it's an off-market deal and they weren't intending to sell. And it's just, you go to them and you say, hey, I'm not going to buy your property today. You're not even intending to sell it, but I'll actually pay you above market value if I can enter this contract with you and buy it in a year after I get approvals. So we actually have a project where we did that, and we didn't have to buy it. We didn't have to take that risk. We had to take some risk with the early, preliminary architectural drawings and the hours our zoning attorney would be at the meetings and stuff, but it's minimal cost compared to buying a project and then, falling on your face. And then the third step, and this is almost a prerequisite for us to get involved, is there has to be a plan B. So if you somehow got denied or you couldn't do those units that you wanted to do in excess of the zoning code, does that by right project by the zoning code still make enough money? Or does it make enough money that you can pay back your investors or break even or whatnot? We won't go after a project if there's no plan B. So we've had projects where we're denied, but because we're so conservative and almost like flighty about that, like fight or flight instinct, we're gonna like run away from a bad project. If there's we've gotten denied, and then we have to build like 3 units when we expected to build 6, but we're still walking away from that project with a couple $100,000 in profit, which is, pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, how much of your time are spent pursuing deals that end up not working out? Is it, one out of 10 you're completing, or kind of how deep do you dig into a deal that ends up not working out?
I'd say if 1 out of 10 would probably be good. I think we probably spend a lot of time, wouldn't you say, Nick, on deals that just sometimes we'll start analyzing a deal at like 8 a.m, and then all of a sudden we're going through, oh, we forgot this and this, and then it's 5 p.m. and that's all we did all day, only to find out, oh, we didn't think of this key component. No way to make this work. This is a complete waste of time. And so we have the mentality, all right, look, that wasn't a waste of time. We learned something from that. We do really tell ourselves that every time. But I'd say it's probably like, I don't know, even as high as like 1 out of 100. Seems like, we have so many that we just pass up. Sometimes it's instant. You look at it and you say, okay, it costs this much. Let's look at some comps. What are condos selling for in that area? Okay, they're selling for this much right nearby. Okay, nope, can't work. There's just no way that could work. We could figure it out quickly, but sometimes it does take a long time, many hours of looking at something, and then you realize that no way. Let's move on.
The preliminary underwriting on these sort of projects is very intense. Some people say, hey, I want to do a quick 10-minute underwriting, and maybe you could pull that off on like a value add multifamily. I'm kind of skeptical about that, to be honest with you, if you're really being responsible. But with these sort of projects, there's so many layers. You got to look, what's the precedent in the neighborhood, and what's the zoning code say, and then you get into the numbers, and there's so many layers to it. And that's why, we've kind of built up a team. We've got Eric, myself, we've got 7 full-time employees in our company, and another good friend of ours since we were kids working with us as well, Kyle, and he's helping us with the underwriting. We've got a virtual assistant that kind of puts in information into a spreadsheet for us, and then we'll go in and fill in. Because before we built up that system, we'd just be kind of spinning our wheels all day, like looking at deals, and that just can't work. So we have to be focused on kind of running things now that we have so many projects going on. But if you have the capacity to build up a team, you can just keep underwriting those deals, and the ability to look at 100 deals and only accept one is kind of a privilege, because that allows you to be really conservative and strict with your projects. And we've never lost money on a project, and it's because of how conservative we are. So it's definitely a good approach.
What's some advice that you might have for folks that are looking to, somebody's like, gosh, this sounds awesome, I want to be able to do this. How do we get started? Is it going back to start with the 2-family stuff and kind of work your way up, or what would you recommend for folks?
That is one route, and that might be the one with the lowest barrier to entry, something like that. If you start a little smaller, I would say, and I think Nick mentioned this at the beginning, don't be afraid to partner or take in even outside investment capital. It's obviously hard to go to someone and say, hey, I've never done anything, why don't you give me some money to do this? That's an issue everyone always brings up. How do you get your foot in the door? And that's a real issue. I would just say, save, because of the potential long-term ramifications on your life and the financial security something like this could bring you and your family. Save what you can at the beginning. Just save. Try to partner at the same time, and try to find a deal that there's a big inefficiency that would allow you, and that's not easy, I know, but they're out there, where it allows you to get in at a very low dollar value, but turns around, even if it's not a ton of money, at least a multiple of your money in some capacity. But those things are kind of the specifics to a deal. But then as far as like the mentality goes, just take in everything as a learning experience, and take in as much as you can. Watch what other people are doing. Like when we first started, there were some kind of, peers, if you will, guys who were doing similar stuff to us. And that's how we saw, okay, look at this. This is going up. What are they doing? We talked with them. We met with them. They're similar age to us. Some of them now we've, surpassed, if you will, and and some have far surpassed us. So now we're saying, okay, what did they do to get to that point? Let's do that. So definitely don't think you know it all, and really just take as much as you can from other people as possible. Those are kind of just specifics and key, mental exercises you can do to get started.
Mm-hmm. Nick, what about you? What do you think?
I think that was great, because my go-to answer is just always keep learning, just like Eric said, have humility, but also have confidence at the same time. So have the humility to say that guy's doing it even better than me, but have the confidence to say I can do it too. I need to like see what he's doing and model it, or what she's doing. So look at what other people are doing and balance, a hungry appetite for learning and research with an ability to take risk. Don't get analysis paralysis, and also don't jump into something without doing any homework. But I'll say from our experience, we'll research stuff and get a good solid understanding. And then we'll say, all right, we got to just jump into one of these sort of projects. Maybe it's an affordable housing job, which we didn't get a chance to speak about, but we're doing one of those. We research it and we think, okay, I kind of get this. And then you jump into a job and it's obviously going to be a little bit different than you like read on some website or heard from some other person's experience secondhand. The best way to learn is to jump in. So I think research, don't be irresponsible, but at a certain point, jump in, take the risk, and just have confidence in yourself. Keep learning.
Awesome. That's great. You guys, there's a lot to uncover there in what you guys do, because those deals, they're so intricate and detailed. For people that want to learn more about kind of your path and what you guys have done, how can they get a hold of you, or where can they go to learn more?
Yeah, our website has a bunch of articles we've written about all the stuff, we've done in our careers, winterspringcapital.com. I've got an ebook that I wrote about the condominium development strategy. You can get that at winterspringcapital.com/development-book. We got a couple other ebooks on there under the investor guide section. We're also very active on Instagram at Winterspring Capital. You can also check out Eric and I on LinkedIn as well. Feel free to add us.
Well, thanks, Nick and Eric, for coming on. Appreciate all that you guys were able to share.
Thanks for having us.